Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Grief and Gathering podcast. Again, for those of you who are listening for the first time, welcome. This is a podcast where we use our understanding of Magic the Gathering to break down mental health intricacies surrounding hard to talk about topics such as depression, anxiety, death, sex, grieving, abuse, all of those kinds of things that are a hard to tackle part of the human experience. And it just means the world to me that you are choosing to spend some of your time out of your busy lives, spending it with me. I don't take that for granted. Now, you might have noticed I said, welcome back again. And I've noticed that every time I come back after a hiatus, I start an episode by apologizing. I explain where I've been, what's been going on. There are hopes of being more consistent, and there may be a little bit of reassurance that I'm okay, or at least I'm getting there. But somewhere along the way, I've realized that this has kind of become part of the show. And not because I want it to be. Because apparently disappearing has become one of the recurring themes in my life. Now, if you've listened for a while, you'll know this isn't exactly new. This podcast has always been a little bit seasonal. Sometimes life gets busy. Sometimes work consumes me. Sometimes grief demands more attention than microphones. Sometimes your girl just needs a break. But this break felt different. But it also felt familiar in a way that I wish it wasn't. It wasn't that I didn't have ideas. God, it wasn't that I didn't have ideas. I have notes upon notes upon notes that are overflowing with episode concepts, psych facts, research bits I've pulled out, how to tie it into Magic the Gathering. I have things on relationships, trauma, grief, identity. I have guests lined up. I have enough content backed up that I could probably record weekly for a year, easy, without having to think of any new ideas. But the problem wasn't creativity. The problem was movement. Because every single day, I think, God, I need to record. God, what kind of creator am I if I'm not creating? Why am I getting badges to attend these events if I'm not putting out product? I think I should record, and then I think maybe tomorrow, and tomorrow became next week. Next week becomes next month. Eventually, enough time passes that coming back feels daunting. And I'm wondering if any of you have ever noticed that. If any of you have ever noticed that sometimes the hardest part of doing something isn't the activity, it's pushing start, it's pushing record, it's pressing play, it's hitting go live. And the longer you're gone, the bigger your absence feels, the more convinced you become that everyone has noticed or that everyone has stopped caring. And so it becomes this vicious cycle of, well, it's been this long, I'm probably falling off the radar already. I've lost my momentum, people are disappointed, and that somehow it turns into you owing an explanation worthy of silence. And it's a weird trap It's a weird, weird, weird trap because nobody, my loves, is keeping score as closely as I am, as closely as you are. If this is something you struggle with, most people are just happy to hear from you again. Most people who listen to this podcast are just going to be happy to hear from me again. And I'm saying that without truly believing it. Because I said this break was different, but also familiar. And in the past, I've taken breaks because my sister died. You know, it's been a year now since two of my sisters have died. And it's been over a year now since I talked to my birth father. It's been over a year since a lot of bad shit has happened. It's been over almost 2 years since I was assaulted by another creator. It's been hospital bills, my partner almost dying in childbirth, us being sued up to our asses, and from bills we couldn't afford to pay following my son's birth. All kinds of things led to breaks. But nothing's been happening. Except I have fallen back into a really, really nasty pit of depression. And that's a hard thing to be willing to admit, especially as someone who does this for a living, right? We like to think that we're not immune to depression because, fuck, if we were immune to mental illness, shit, I don't even know. There wouldn't be any of us left. But we think we do a good job noticing. But my love's depression is an incredible storyteller. Depression is the most toxic friendship you can imagine, because when you feel depressed, depression is there to tell you all of the things that you don't need to hear. But it frames it in a way like it's your lifelong friend who's trying to be helpful. But my love's depression is one of the best liars you will ever meet. It tells you that everyone has forgotten you. It tells you that they didn't actually enjoy the product that you put out. It tells you that if you come back now, people will think you're inconsistent or you're lazy or you're unreliable. That it's already too late. But here's the worst part. When those things are going through your mind, it doesn't sound like depression. It sounds like reason. And that's what makes it so difficult. Depression rarely walks into the room announcing itself. It doesn't come in and say, hey, what's up, bitches? I'm your mental illness. Sit down. We're going to be fucking miserable for the next 2 months. Instead, it says, you're just being realistic. Maybe you're finally recognizing that this isn't important. Maybe no one really cares. Maybe people have moved on. It says you'll record when you have something that's actually worth talking about. And when we're in those spaces, those thoughts sound really rational. And you start to believe them. And before you know it, you haven't talked to your friends, you haven't recorded, you haven't written, you haven't been on a stream, you haven't played your favorite games. Life can go from living to existing very quickly when you're depressed. I'll say that again. Life can go from living to existing. Depression makes life go from living to existing. And one thing I wish more people understood is that depression doesn't always feel like overwhelming sadness. I'm someone, personally, I struggle with chronic suicidal ideation. I have my entire life, since the point I think I was 12, always had what I call passive suicidality, where the intent is never truly there, but it's always a possibility. But that's not what depression always looks like. Sometimes it's numbness, sometimes it's exhaustion, sometimes you just get smaller. Your world gets smaller. Your hobbies get smaller. Your friendships get smaller. Your curiosity gets smaller. Eventually, your life only consists of the things you absolutely have to do. Eventually, my life only consists of taking care of my son, making sure his needs are met, going to work, feeding my family, and sleeping. Everything else falls away quietly, but it doesn't happen overnight. It's gradual and you don't even notice. I think a lot of Mill effects and that one lovely person who's like, oh, it's just a ruin crab. It's just 3 cards. No one gives a shit about 3 cards. It's a 100-card deck. And then 3 cards turns into 6, turns into 9, to 12, to 15, to 30, to 33, to 67. And next thing you know, you're playing with a really small hand of cards. I've talked before about grief shrinking the world. And I think depression does something similar. But where it's different is grief. Grief is trying to wrestle with 2 opposites. Grief is wrestling with this feeling that you have to carry everything while also feeling as though you can't carry anything. Depression is saying that nothing is worth carrying. Depression is, I have the ability, but it's not worth it. And they can look identical, but they're worlds apart, my loves. And that's what we're talking about today. That's what we've been talking about today. We're going on, I don't know, 15, 12, I don't know how many minutes. But for the past 2, 3, however long I've been gone, months, I've been asking myself a question that I still don't have a perfect answer to. How do you know when you're taking a healthy break? Or that you've stopped living because depression has quietly convinced you that you don't care anymore? Because when you're in it, fuck, that's a hard question to answer, especially now. You know, something that a lot of big name psychologists have really been pushing, a lot of mental health professionals have been pushing, family experts, marriage family therapists, people like Brene Brown, they love to talk about boundaries. There's a whole book exploring the let them theory, talking about protecting your peace, taking breaks, resting, touching grass, logging off, choosing yourself. And to be clear, those things are so important because burnout is real, chronic stress is real, overwork is real. Facts are, we live in a capitalistic hellscape that will convince us that our worth is directly measured by productivity if we let it. Rest matters. You, me, anyone, we don't have to earn the right to rest. No one is owed a justification of why we rest. We are allowed to stop. But what's hard is we're going back. Depression is that toxic player at the table. Depression is that player at the table who acts like they're playing group hug and is there to help everyone, but really, they're not helping anybody but themselves. Depression hears that advice, and our lovely, lovely frenemy of depression has this nasty habit of wearing self-care like a disguise. Depression wears self-care like a disguise. It whispers, yeah, take another week. You need more time. Until suddenly, what started as rest has quietly become isolation. And that's where I have found myself. And I'm talking about all of this, and I'm using myself as an example because it's easy. It's easy for a psychologist to get a microphone and talk clinically at people. But I'm not doing therapy right now. I'm here talking with you all. In therapy, in a lot of modalities of therapy, self-disclosure is discouraged or suggested to be limited. By disclosing our own challenges, there runs a risk of making the session focused on us instead of the client. That's not what's happening here. I'm using myself as the best example that I have for you all because nobody is immune to this. There are some people who laughably think I have my shit together, and no, sure don't. When my rest became isolation, it wasn't conscious. I never decided that I was just going to stop doing this show. I never decided that I wasn't going to talk to any of my friends for weeks at a time. I never decided that I was going to stop building commander decks. I was going to stop doing X, Y, and Z. But each day, it becomes a little bit harder to imagine starting again. But eventually you realize something. You realize you're not resting anymore. Fuck, I've slept past noon, I think the past 3 weeks, every day. I'm not resting anymore. I was disappearing. And rest and disappearing are not the same thing. I think one of the reasons that this question surrounding how do we tell if it's burnout versus depression, I think one of the reasons this has been so hard for me is because these things are so good at impersonating each other. They wear the same clothes, they build the same decks, they make concentration harder. They both make the things you love feel more difficult than they used to. Both of them leave you staring at a project you genuinely care about and think, I can't. But what I have found is looking into our bodies, being willing to sit with depression, to sit with our burnout, and listen. Because when I'm burned out, my body feels like it's waving a white flag. It's saying, bitch, I can't do anymore. I've given too much. I've cared too much. My cup is beyond empty. Burnout is my body begging me to recognize that I need to take care of myself. Depression doesn't sound like that. Depression doesn't say things like, you need to take care of yourself. Depression doesn't tell you that you've given too much. Depression says, why bother doing anything? Nothing matters. Burnout says, I need a weekend. Depression says weekends don't help. Burnout says, I miss doing the things I love. Depression says, but did you ever really love doing them? And that's a lie. And I want to really, really acknowledge this and really hit it home. Depression lies. And it lies to every single one of us who struggles with it. And it doesn't get away with it because we're unintelligent. Depression is not a successful liar because you're weak. But it's because our brains don't just experience the world, they interpret it. And every moment of every day, your brain is constructing a story about what's happening around you. Most of the time, those stories are helpful enough. Sometimes they're wildly inaccurate. If you've ever walked past someone you know and they didn't say hello, your brain automatically starts writing a script of they're mad at me, they ignore me, they hate me, I must have said something and I knew it, they hated me. And that spiral can happen to anybody. A few hours later, you find out they just weren't wearing their glasses. They didn't see you. They were looking at their phone. But our brains are constantly filling in missing information. Depression just happens to be a really, really pessimistic author. It takes every blank in your story and makes it the worst. Nobody texted you back? Well, they don't actually like you. You haven't made an episode in months? Ugh, you're not really a content creator. You don't deserve any of this. Every explanation becomes an identity. With burnout, the explanation is a reason. I'm struggling because I'm tired. With depression, explanation becomes an identity. You're not struggling to record, you're someone who doesn't record. You're not having trouble connecting, you're someone that people don't want around. You didn't misplay a game of Commander, you are just so dog shit at the game that of course you lost. Depression turns temporary experiences into permanent identities. In the psychology world, a big part of therapy is helping clients walk through cognitive distortions, all or nothing thinking that, well, if I don't do this, then I'm shit, that there's no room for gray area, fortune telling or mind reading, feeling as though we're supposed to just automatically know what other people want, catastrophizing, all of those things. I know the vocabulary, I know the treatment manuals. And yet, when it's your own brain telling the story, it still feels true. And that's something we don't say often enough, that insight is not immunity. Understanding depression doesn't mean that you can't become depressed. Knowing your brain is lying doesn't mean shit. Because if every single day your brain is saying, you don't matter and what you do doesn't matter, you start to believe it. But healing isn't about having the correct information all the time. Healing is about learning how to build a folder full of experiences that challenge the story that depressed little shit is trying to tell in your brain. Which brings me back to this podcast, because every single week that I don't record becomes evidence. See? You don't actually do this anymore. Every unopened file, every outline that's never been recorded, every idea in my notes app, it's evidence. until you stop and ask yourself, until I stopped and asked myself something I would ask my clients, my students, my loved ones all the time: what evidence proves the opposite? If depression is saying I don't make podcasts anymore, what would disprove that? Making one, just one. I'm not committing to 50. I'm still not promising weekly uploads. I'm not mapping out the next year. I'm just pressing record. It's funny how often our brains demand certainty before they'll let us act. I'll start once I'm motivated. I'll go back once I'm confident. I'm going to go to my LGS for Friday Night Magic when I'm a little more comfortable with the rules. When I know someone, we keep moving that goalpost. We wait to feel better before we do the thing. But motivation often follows action. It's not the other way around. Confidence often follows repetition. We do a thing so often we grow our confidence. Connection follows reaching out. We wait to feel better before we do the thing, when very often doing the thing is what helps us feel better. And I want to be careful here. I'm not telling you to force yourself through burnout. If your body's telling you it needs rest, I need you to listen to it. If your nervous system has been under siege from firing for months on end, recovery isn't laziness, it is necessary. But here's a question I've started asking myself. When I imagine coming back to whatever it is I've stopped doing, what emotion comes up first? If the answer may be, I'm exhausted, that's information. It may be, I'm terrified, that's different information. But when the answer is, what does it matter? That's when my ears perk up. Because that's not always the fatigue talking. That's depression trying to convince me the future's already been decided. Depression loves acting like a fortune teller. It's like fucking Star Wars when Obi-Wan is like, only a Sith speaks in absolutes. Which, the Jedi suck, the Sith are great. But depression loves to speak in absolutes. It tells us it'll never get better. You're always going to feel this way. Nothing will change. Funny thing is, if depression could actually predict the future, none of us would ever recover. And yet millions of us do every single year. Not because we suddenly become stronger than depression, but because we learn. We learn what it is we need. We learn what it means to sit with it. I've started realizing that one of the ways I know depression is in the driver's seat is when I stop doing the things that have never been about productivity. The things that have never had a deadline or an audience or a paycheck, just joy. When I stop playing the games that I love, when I stop reading, when I stop recording this podcast, when I stop reaching out to people that I care about and people I love, that's not a sign that I need more rest anymore. It's a sign that depression is shrinking my world again. Sometimes healing doesn't begin with waiting until you feel like coming back. Sometimes it begins by showing up before you feel ready. And honestly, this episode is that for me. So if you have found yourself disappearing from your pods, from your art, from your friends, your rituals, your passions, I hope, my lovely neighbor, that you'll consider the possibility that you don't need to wait until you feel better to take one small step back towards them. Not because motivation comes first, but because sometimes motivation is what quietly follows after we've already begun. I want to take some time and Thank you all for choosing to spend time with me today. It means the absolute world. However, many of you choose to take 30 minutes out of your lives to listen and sit with me as we work through these things. It means the world. I want to thank Manipool for letting me work with you all. For those of you who have not gotten the joys of using Manipool yet, I implore you to do so. Manipool has become my absolute favorite card buying, selling service. Their cart optimization tool is amazing. It lets you decide if you want a cart that will get here in the fewest amount of packages, or if you care about saving the most money, or if you're fine with somewhere in between. They're just an all-around amazing service. Selling through them is amazing. They take little to no fees. So head on over to manipool.com, use the code FOXGLOVE at checkout, and you'll get an extra 500 points towards a future purchase. That's an extra $5 for a future purchase. So get yourself a nice little extra card, a little upgrade for that budget brew you may be working on. Also, head on over to Commander's Herald, and you can find my column over there where we use the written medium to talk about a lot of the same things we talk about here. And if you're not reading my stuff, read someone else's, because there are a lot of talented folks over there. But as always, this has been the Grief and Gathering podcast. Thank you, my lovely neighbor, for taking time out of your day to spend it with me. Remember that it is you that I like. You are great, just the way that you are. And I will look forward to seeing you next time. Bye bye.